knocked out here, but the match continues.
James Bryan Hellwig, known as the Ultimate Warrior, was indeed a wrestling phenomenon during the late 1980s and early 1990s. A neon-lit force of nature who sprinted to the ring, shook the ropes with ferocity, and painted his face like a living comic book hero. Kids idolized him, crowds roared for him, and he became the embodiment of wrestling's larger-than-life spectacle. However, beneath the wild intensity lay a complex man. His meteoric rise was shadowed by fierce disputes with WWE leadership and bouts with fellow wrestlers, fueled by his stubborn determination and creative clashes. This is the story of a legend who reached incredible heights, faced dramatic falls, and ultimately found a final, heartfelt redemption. Now, let's dive into the journey of the Ultimate Warrior and discover what made him a figure both celebrated and debated to this day. The rise from bodybuilder to wrestling's meteoric star. James Bryan Hellwig was a young man looking for strength and self-identity before he rose to fame as a global wrestling icon. At the age of 11, he started lifting weights and described himself as a small, insecure kid who didn't belong in team sports. Hellwig gave bodybuilding his all after relocating to California and meeting bodybuilding icon Robbie Robinson. He participated in a number of bodybuilding contests in the early 1980s, placing fifth in a number of them, including the 1981 AAU Collegiate Mr. America and the 1985 Junior USA, and winning the 1984 NPC Mr. Georgia title and the AAU Coastal USA. He even had plans to become a chiropractor for a while. However, everything changed in 1985. Garland Donahoe, Mark Miller, and Steve Borden, who would later become Sting, were among the bodybuilders Hellwig joined as they transitioned into professional wrestling. They established Power Team USA and trained with Rick Bassman and Red Bastion. Hellwig and Borden were soon placed together as a tag team in Memphis's Continental Wrestling Association, initially known as the Freedom Fighters, with Hellwig as Justice and Borden as Flash. They were first presented as fan favorites, then later turned villains under the guidance of Buddy Wayne, and later Dutch Mantel. However, because the pair were essentially bodybuilders first and wrestlers second, they were stiff and unpolished, often hitting too hard in the ring. Their rough style led to a short run in Memphis. On December 28, 1985, during a TV interview with Lance Russell, the two were given a new identity as the Blade Runners, as Hellwig became Blade Runner Rock and Borden became Blade Runner Sting. Not long after, they made their way to Bill Watts's Mid-South Wrestling, which eventually rebranded into the Universal Wrestling Federation. According to Joseph Laurinaitis, better known as Road Warrior Animal, Bill Watts actually came up with the Blade Runners concept, and the whole idea was supposed to be a kind of parody version of the Road Warriors. Still, under Eddie Gilbert's Hot Stuff International stable, Rock and Sting started to gain some real momentum. But by 1986, Hellwig decided to go his own way, leaving the team behind. After that, he joined World Class Championship Wrestling, where he became known as the Dingo Warrior. According to some, he adopted the moniker after another wrestler commented that he appeared to be a warrior. However, others, such as Road Warrior Animal, asserted that it was intended to mimic the image of the Road Warriors. Whatever the source, Hellwig began to discover who he was. Building that wild, primal aura that seemed larger than life, he won the WCWA World Tag Team Championship with Lance Von Erich and went on to win the WCWA Texas Heavyweight Championship. His time in WCCW helped him develop his character and presence, setting the stage for his bigger break. When he officially became the Ultimate Warrior and signed with the WWF in 1987, everything changed. Whether Warrior came up with the name during an early promotional campaign or Vince McMahon did, it was a perfect fit. Warrior didn't simply walk into the ring. Instead, he ran at full speed, shook the ropes as if they were holding him back, and had a mythic appearance thanks to his bright neon face paint. Kids loved him instantly. His popularity really took off at the very first SummerSlam in 1988, when he beat the Honky Tonk Man in just 31 seconds, ending Honky's massive 454-day run as Intercontinental Champion. Then, about a year later, he won the title back again from Rick Rude, which pretty much solidified him as one of the company's biggest stars. By 1990, the company was clearly grooming him to be Hulk Hogan's successor. Their big clash happened at WrestleMania 6 in Toronto, billed as the Ultimate Challenge. Both the WWF Championship and the Intercontinental Championship were on the line. Warrior ended up pinning Hogan clean, which was huge, since Hogan hadn't taken a clean loss since 1981. Warrior walked away as the first wrestler in WWF history to hold both titles at the same time. Soon after, he vacated the Intercontinental Championship, as required by WWF rules, paving the way for Mr. Perfect to pick it up in a tournament. To fans, this was the coronation of wrestling's next great hero. Behind the scenes, things weren't nearly as smooth. The pressure of being the top guy, mixed with growing egos and creative disagreements, started causing tension. Those small cracks were already forming, and they were only going to get bigger. The controversy, ego conflicts, and walkouts. For all the electricity the Ultimate Warrior brought to the ring, his career behind the scenes was just as intense, but not in the way fans saw. While his character captured the imagination of millions, the man behind the paint, Jim Hellwig, was constantly at odds with the business that made him a star. His journey to the top was fast, loud, and dramatic, and the conflicts that followed were just as explosive. By 1990, Warrior was riding high. He had beaten Hulk Hogan clean at WrestleMania 6 to win the WWF Championship, and a year later, at WrestleMania 7, he defeated Randy Savage in the famous retirement match, solidifying him as one of the company's biggest attractions. In his mind, that meant he deserved to be treated and paid like a top star, and from his perspective, he wasn't getting that. Everything boiled over in July 1991. Hellwig sent Vince McMahon a long, handwritten letter, pouring out his frustrations. He insisted that he had given everything to the WWF and was being undervalued compared to Hogan. In short, Warrior felt he was carrying just as much of the company's success. He demanded $550,000 for WrestleMania 7, as well as equal merchandise and gate revenue. He made it clear that until this was settled, he wasn't stepping foot back into the ring. The timing could not have been worse for McMahon. SummerSlam 1991 was only weeks away, and Warrior was booked in the main event. Losing him before the show would have been a disaster. So McMahon agreed to the demands. Warrior worked the match. Then, as soon as he walked backstage afterward, McMahon handed him a suspension letter. In that letter, McMahon claimed the deal had been forced under threat, accused Warrior of missing appearances, and argued that he was already making over $1.3 million a year. Warrior felt betrayed. He walked away from the company later that year and sued in 1992. Yet, in wrestling, bridges are almost never burned forever. The two reconciled, and Warrior returned in 1992 under a new deal with improved merchandise royalty. His return happened at WrestleMania 8, and it couldn't have come at a more dramatic moment. With Hulk Hogan preparing to step away from the company, Vince McMahon needed another larger-than-life hero. So, when Warrior's music hit, and he sprinted down the aisle to save Hogan from an attack by Papa Shango and Sid Justice, the crowd erupted. It was a massive, arena-shaking reaction, proof that despite everything, fans still wanted the Ultimate Warrior. For a moment, it felt like the magic was back. But just like before, that renewed partnership didn't last long. Around this time, the WWF was caught up in a major steroid distribution investigation. Warrior confirmed he had used steroids, and after testing positive, the company decided to release him. That exit sparked yet another legal dispute only a few months later. Several years of on and off appearances in smaller promotions followed, until 1996, when Hellwig made yet another return to the WWF, this time with a very strong contract. It included a guaranteed $1 million for 18 months, a reduced schedule, and, importantly, the rights to the Ultimate Warrior character. However, familiar patterns returned quickly. Warrior missed scheduled shows, disagreements popped up, and the deal fell apart, sending him right back into legal conflict. Even then, McMahon tried one more time. In 1997, he offered Warrior a 5-year contract with a $750,000 base salary and a massive 35% cut of merchandise, which was practically unheard of. Instead of accepting, Warrior signed with WCW in 1998. This move sparked a copyright battle over the Warrior character and led to a short, chaotic run in WCW, remembered mostly for confusing promos and his infamous rematch with Hogan at Halloween Havoc that is widely considered one of the worst major matches in wrestling history. In 2005, WWE released The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, a documentary where wrestlers and staff criticized Warrior as egotistical and difficult to work with. It also revisited the heated tensions around SummerSlam 1991, claiming that Hulk Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter were ready to physically confront Warrior backstage before McMahon intervened. The film highlighted how Warrior's actions derailed planned storylines, including a major feud with Jake the Snake Roberts. Roberts had turned heel specifically for the angle, and losing it cost him both momentum and income, leaving lasting resentment. However, Roberts later shared that Warrior personally apologized to him in 2014, which he appreciated. Warrior and his wife eventually sued WWE, arguing that the documentary unfairly damaged his reputation. Throughout his career, Warrior inspired passionate reactions on both sides. Fans adored his intensity, face paint, and exhilarating entrances, and he was a childhood hero to millions. But within the wrestling industry, many saw him as his own greatest obstacle, a performer whose ego, mistrust, and recurring conflicts prevented him from sustaining his success. The redemption from outcast to Hall of Famer. For a long time, it looked like the Ultimate Warrior and WWE were done for good. The relationship had been buried under lawsuits, bitter interviews, and years of resentment. WWE's 2005 documentary, The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, painted him as unstable and unprofessional, and Warrior publicly fired back, criticizing the company and Vince McMahon in return. Fans still remembered him with a kind of electrified nostalgia, but within the wrestling world, he was viewed as someone who had burned every bridge behind him. In many ways, he became a legend and an outsider at the same time. Things began to shift quietly in 2013. In February of that year, Warrior posted a video announcing he would appear at WrestleCon. What really caught people's attention wasn't the appearance itself, it was how he talked. For the first time in years, he spoke about McMahon with respect instead of anger. When he showed up at WrestleCon, fans lined up in huge numbers to see him. The organizers even had to print extra tickets. Clearly, fans still cared deeply about him. Even after all those years, people who grew up watching him run to the ring in full face paint still wanted to see him again. The real movement toward healing happened later that year. WWE reached out to Warrior about being featured in the video game WWE 2K14. That invitation opened the door to conversation. Triple H and Vince McMahon met with him privately. No cameras, no PR, no public performance. Those meetings mattered. They were emotional reconnections. Years of frustration and misunderstanding were finally put on the table. Slowly, the hostility softened. There was room now for honesty and even forgiveness. By early 2014, the reconciliation was complete. WWE announced that the Ultimate Warrior would be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. The reaction across the wrestling world was huge, with cheers, relief, and a sense that something long overdue was finally being made right. On April 5, 2014, Warrior walked onto the Hall of Fame stage in New Orleans. Fans expected the wild, roaring promo style he was famous for. Instead, he spoke with calm and gratitude. He thanked his wife and daughters, thanked the fans who never forgot him, and thanked WWE for giving him the chance to come home. He closed his speech by announcing a new long-term deal to work with WWE as an ambassador, showing that this was a genuine homecoming. 2 nights later, on April 7th, he appeared on Monday Night Raw for the first time in nearly 18 years. Wearing a jacket with his signature warrior symbol, he delivered a heartfelt message about legacy, mortality, and how a person's impact lives on through others. His words felt heavy, almost prophetic. Every man's heart one day beats its final beat. His lungs breathe their final breath, and if what that man did in his life makes the blood pulse through the body of others and makes them believe deeper in something larger than life, then his essence, his spirit will be immortalized. The crowd roared not just from nostalgia, but because it felt like Warrior was finally closing his story with dignity. But the celebration was heartbreakingly short-lived. The very next day, on April 8, 2014, Warrior collapsed while walking to his car with his wife outside their hotel in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead at age 54. Reports later noted that he had looked unusually weak and out of breath throughout WrestleMania weekend. Even though he had just signed a long-term ambassador contract and appeared on Raw the night before, that appearance would be his final moment in WWE. There was a strange, poetic completeness to it. After decades of conflict and distance, Warrior had come back, stood before the fans who never forgot him, and reclaimed his place in wrestling history. And once that final moment was given, once the story was whole, he exited. Legacy and impact, the Warrior lives on. The Ultimate Warrior's legacy is remembered first and foremost for his explosive intensity that was loud, bold, and impossible to ignore. The moment his entrance music hit and he came sprinting down the aisle, shaking the ropes like he was channeling pure electricity, he felt larger than life. For many fans growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, Warrior wasn't just a wrestler, he was a superhero. Real. His influence can still be seen in wrestling today. Performers like Batista, Jeff Hardy, the Young Bucks, and Darby Allin all embody that idea of high-energy entrances, emotional momentum, and strong visual identity. Warrior helped turn the entrance itself into part of the show, a jolt of adrenaline before the match even began. His promos were another unforgettable element. They were chaotic, cosmic, and filled with intensity rather than logic. People still debate what they meant, but the meaning was in the feeling. His words, tone, and presence created a mythic aura that set him apart from everyone else. However, Warrior's legacy isn't simple. After his career, he faced criticism for personal conflicts and outspoken remarks, which affected how many saw him. But near the end of his life, things changed. When he reunited with WWE in 2013 to 2014, fans saw a more reflective and appreciative Warrior. His Hall of Fame speech thanked his family, the fans, and the business he once clashed with. And on his final Raw appearance, he spoke about how a person's spirit lives on through the stories people remember. Words that gained deeper meaning when he passed away the very next day. After his death, WWE honored him in several ways. He received a posthumous Slammy Award for Return of the Year in 2014. In 2015, WWE released Ultimate Warrior: A Life Lived Forever, a biography documenting his career and cultural impact. That same year, the Warrior Award was introduced to recognize individuals who show courage and strength in the face of adversity. Though there has been debate about how closely the award aligns with Warrior's own vision, who intended to honor behind-the-scenes employees, it continues to stand as a symbol of resilience. His legacy has continued to be revisited and reinterpreted. In 2021, his life was featured in two major documentaries: A&E's biography, WWE Legends episode on The Ultimate Warrior, which focused on his career and redemption, and Dark Side of the Ring, which explored the controversies, conflicts, and flaws behind the character. Together, they highlight the two sides of Warrior, the hero and the human. And maybe that's what makes his legacy enduring. He was intense, inspiring, complicated, and unforgettable. The man is gone, but the energy he created still pulses through wrestling history. The Warrior lives on. Marvelous verdict. The Ultimate Warrior's career really plays out like a story in 3 acts: a fast, powerful rise to fame, a messy and complicated middle, and a final chapter of peace and recognition. He burst into wrestling like a force of nature, all intensity and adrenaline, becoming one of the most unforgettable stars of wrestling's golden era. Along with that success came conflicts, controversies, and personal struggles that shaped how people viewed him for years. Even so, one thing never changed: the bond he had with the fan. People didn't just watch Warrior, they felt it. He was flawed, fierce, emotional, and sometimes hard to understand, but that passion was real, and it's what made him stand apart. His energy wasn't something you could fake. That's why, decades later, his name still means something. He may have burned bridges, but he also burned brighter than almost anyone who ever stepped inside a wrestling ring. And that kind of fire doesn't disappear. So now we want to hear from you. Which Ultimate Warrior moment stands out the most in your memory? Tell us in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stick around. We have got plenty more classic wrestling stories coming your way.